And now we're recording. So we're live again. Welcome back to our fourth video on problems of American democracy with Anders Olsson and myself, Daniel Ogden. Last time we talked about the Democratic Party, and today we're going to talk about the Republican Party, Donald Trump, the Republican Party, and we'll try to understand what is happening and where it's leading and what the impact will be on the American political system. So without further ado, Anders, how would you describe the Republican Party today and where is it going?
Well,
Short
that's
answer first. No,
I
long
mean,
answer.
first of all, it's not a unified party anymore. I don't think even, or it's in the process of breaking up. It seems you have a base that's been radicalized over decades by a bunch of political grifters, and you have a party elite that's basically in the lap of big business donors, and the two are at odds with each other, and there's no way really to reconcile the conflict. This is what you're seeing today with the conflict between Trump on the one hand, Trump and his base, and Mitch McConnell, Mr. Republican Party, just a couple of years ago. On the other hand, and it's basically an open civil war in the party. That's like the best, most fair way to describe it, I think.
So a pretty dire situation, you would say. As you say, open civil war between these different factions.
Yeah. No,
but how did we get here then? I mean, it used to be a unified party, very much so, and there's always different interest groups within different parties, and same thing with the Democrats, although it is a much more diverse party, I would say, than the Republican Party. But it's always got a base, and then you have the Republican establishment, big business, open trade, and low taxes, especially for the rich. And there's always been a bet. So how do we get to this point where it's like open civil war? What's your opinion on that?
It's a great historical irony. The Republicans have over decades they've used social issues as wedges to mobilize reactionary white, mainly white voters, and stoke up racial hatred and fear about feminism and like any issue you can name, basically. And they've tried to channel this this popular fear and rage into basically obedience to the Republican Party, using these as triggers to get people to go to the polls and vote, and then taking that political capital and thrown a few crumbs to their base, and then gone ahead with like a pro-business agenda. And this is what's happened over decades, and finally in the last 10 years, the radicalization of the base has gotten completely out of hand, and at the same time, this historical figure, Trump, shows up, and he's a man of the base of the party. He doesn't belong to the Republican elite, the inner core of the party leadership. He's an outsider, and he takes control over the party. Or rather, he's a conduit for the base to take control of this party, which they voted for decades, but never had any real say in.
No.
And that's my view of it. The party leadership has completely lost control, and I'm not sure. Do you see any way they can actually like get control back over their party? Like, before the latest trial against Trump, Mitch McConnell seemed intent on purging the party, but in the latest run of elections, you had like a bunch of real like crackpot Republican candidates winning the election. So it feels like it's spreading in the the party.
Yeah, exactly. So if we look at the Republican Party from the point of view of these two leaders, if you like, Donald Trump and McConnell, the two different phalanxes or sections of the party, the old established Republican Party, the establishment, represented by Mitch McConnell, who's been in power for years and has really transformed the Republican Party, has made it into a party of political power. And so is Donald Trump, but they've done so in very different ways, which is interesting, and also why they're on a collision course, one could say, although I think Trump is winning. But McConnell has his base in the Senate, and he was ruler of the Senate. And as he referred to himself to a group of donors once, I am your Darth Vader. I will stop anything progressive from getting through, like tax reform or things like that, which is interesting from a democratic point of view. Okay, and going back earlier when he told Republican donors that the only thing stopping Obama is me. And he did it too. I mean, with the Senate, and especially when he delayed confirmation hearings on the Supreme Court justice nominee that Obama had. They had a whole year to do it. And normally, if the two parties were nice to each other and, had the same rules of civility like it in a way used to be, although that might be exaggerated, then Obama would have appointed this Supreme Court justice. And McConnell said, no, we're not even going to have hearings about this. And then, of course, fast forward to last year when he managed to appoint and confirm a very controversial Supreme Court justice in like a few days or something. But he's built up his power base. It's very interesting in the Senate. So he's used that as a power base, but he's also used that to get conservative members on the Supreme Court. And he's also used that to put conservative judges in the federal court system. So now today, I mean, in the 1960s and 70s, people with liberal ideas and who were in favor of expanding democratic rights to Black people, women, what have you, people looked to the Supreme Court. Now the Supreme Court is enormously conservative, and the federal court system has become much more conservative. So in the unelected areas of government, he's carved out a very, very powerful position, not just for himself, but for the Republican Party. And this is what he sees as his legacy. And then, unbeknownst to him, you have this outsiders who say Trump, and if you're going to change Washington, you have to be an outsider. Everybody's an outsider. And they always run as an outsider, which I think is funny. But in this case, he was really truly the outsider. And the only people that he really maybe represented is the wrong word, because I'm not sure he really understood this support was there, was this great mass of the Republican voters who were not supporters of Mitch McConnell, couldn't care less about people like that, but people were very angry about a number of things. And this built up over a very long period of time. And then, so during Trump's administration, these two sort of, well, they had to cooperate. And McConnell got his big tax cuts, and Trump got, I don't know, attention.
Yeah,
But now that he's lost, now as you say, these two. It's very difficult to see these two parts of the party coalescing again and kissing and make up. So. And I think it's very important, as you say, this goes, people say, well, it all started with Trump. Trump was a catalyst, but it goes back much longer. and
Yeah,
this Republican dissatisfaction, because it wasn't, people didn't really pay attention to it, but it was building up all the time. And if you look back at it, you can see, I mean, remember the Tea Party? I mean,
yeah.
I remember when that started, and people thought, boy, these people are radical. No, they wanted lower taxes. I mean, compare that to the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. So yeah, what do you think about these steps that led up to the present situation? Why were Republican voters more than Democratic voters? Why were they so upset with what America was becoming? Or I don't know how to phrase that.
It's really, if you really want to go back, it probably started in 1864. But
Civil War.
yeah,
or,
but
or the
like
founding of the country too. If we want.
exactly, yeah. The modern process started probably, if you have to like pick a date, I'd say 1964. With the Goldwater's run for president. This is when political strategists realized that you can use racial hatred and racial anxiety to mobilize people and tie them to a specific political party.
Right.
And like a couple of years later, in 68 and 72, with Nixon's two elections, this became like an important plank in the Republican election strategy, the Southern strategy, appealing to formerly democratic racists in the American South, and leveraging that voter group to reach a majority on the national level. the sorry, allergies.
Yep, it's that time of year. Same thing here too. So people just
Yeah, no, but and then at the same time, you have this parallel strand of political hucksters and snake oil salesmen who set up first like direct mail networks and then media organizations, basically grifting people out of money and using the same political issues as the Republican Party to just basically rile people up and get them to send you money for some kind of campaign or some kind of like sometimes literal like snake oil, like alternative medicine and stuff. And this is something that for some reason has worked particularly well on the right side of the political spectrum, this kind of grifting. And these two threads run hand in hand throughout history, and they've kept reinforcing each other. And eventually you get to a point where the Republican Party is more or less openly racist, at least in practice. Maybe not so much like self-admittedly racist, but it's openly trying to disenfranchise black and brown people and taking the side of police killing black people in the streets and stuff like that. And the grifting side of the conservative movement has moved on to just peddling outright conspiracy theories, like going from like alternative medicine and stuff in like the 70s and 80s to promoting birtherism, claiming that Obama wasn't born in America and not like a legitimate president. And today it's like fanciful QAnon theories about like all of Hollywood being secretly arrested and sent to like military prisons and stuff, and Hillary Clinton eating babies and that kind of stuff. So it's a mutually reinforcing process between these two these two movements, like grifters and political strategists. And for the longest time, since 1964, both sides have thought that they could control the base they're appealing to.
Right.
They can make a profit out of this, either politically or economically. And finally, they've come to a point where they just lost control. Right. They just got away from them. And like the real breaking point is the election of Donald Trump.
Right.
And like I said, now it's completely out of hand. And I don't think because the problem is the Republican Party hasn't like had a real political project for a long time. I mean, it's since Reagan, it's been starve the state, cut taxes, cut benefits, that sort of thing. There's not a whole lot left to cut. So where do you go from here? And what issue do you mobilize people around at this point? If you try to like play into the ideas of Donald Trump and the base, you're just going to end up reinforcing crazy conspiracy theories and stuff like that. And things are going to continue getting more and more heated and just more crazy as time goes by. And if you try to do the opposite and propose some sort of political project, you're probably going to be labeled as like a communist or a traitor or like a secret Democrat or like a pedophile devil worshipper or whatever. So it's I don't know, I can't really like see a way forward. Do you have any ideas?
It's difficult to do that, definitely. I'll come back to that. But I think it's very important to emphasize these two different strains, which I hadn't thought of before, how the dissatisfaction with the Republican establishment, people being angry, especially about racial politics, passage of the '64 Civil Rights Act, and this whole grifting thing, which we talked a little bit about earlier before we went live, because it was a topic I wanted to take up. And I saw it more as a more recent thing. Donald Trump, I mean, he's just making money off of this is how he operates. That's how he operated in New York. This is how he operated on television. He was basically broke. And then the head of, I forget his name. He went to work. He's still at CNN, I think, although I think he's leaving. But he gave Trump a chance to do The Apprentice. And Trump was basically broke. He said, I'll pay you like millions of dollars to do that. We know that you're not a successful businessman, but maybe you could play that. That's amazing. And he did that. But it's just that the grifting thing to make, make money from these crazy schemes. Trump is excellent at doing this. And now it's filtered down into these younger, if you like, crazier members of the House of Representatives, where you just set up a fund. You're saying voters are not being nice to me. They don't like my extremist views. Send me money, which is the same thing as Donald Trump saying during the help my campaign. And it's not going to these recognized so-called PACs, political action groups, but they're just, send me the money. And so people are picking up on this. And what I didn't realize until I talked to you earlier, that this goes back so far in the history of the Republican Party. Interestingly, to the same point in time when the Republican Party decides, if we're ever going to get in power again, we have to focus on the white vote in the South, because it was the Kennedy Johnson administration that brought in the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So the South, especially the Black South, was Democratic. If we can get any power at all, and the Southern strategy, as much with Goldwater, was unsuccessful. He had one of the greatest presidential losses in history, and people thought, well, that's out of the way.
5 states.
if even that. So there's certain things about Goldwater that attracted young people who later switched to the Democratic Party. But anyway, but then, and people thought, well, it's over. It was a failed strategy. And then Richard Nixon gets elected primarily through that strategy. And another thing I thought I'd touch on, because looking back at it historically, this dissatisfaction with the right or the base, it goes by different names in the Republican Party. It really starts there because they're unhappy about racial equality, and then later on is feminism and all sorts of different things. But it was called the right wing of the party then. They wanted to have more to say. And the establishment, the people before McConnell said, no, you're not going to get that. But they're starting to influence the way candidates are chosen. And when Ronald Reagan was elected, and it's interesting now that nobody talks about Ronald Reagan anymore. I mean, in the old days, Ronald Reagan was God, and, all Republicans are going to be Ronald Reagan because he got Democratic votes and so forth. But that was the last time that happened. Nobody talks about Ronald Reagan. They only talk about Donald Trump. But I remember the religious right, as it was called at that time, was very, they had high hopes for Ronald Reagan because he believed in an apocalypse and, people being beamed up to heaven and all that. Very scary stuff for those of us who didn't believe in that. But he never sort of delivered on those promises. No abortion, no gay rights, no, everything. And then he was there for 2 terms. And then, George Bush Sr. didn't make much of an impression. But then with George W. Bush, once again, this is, of course, all before 9/11, the religious right or the moral majority, whatever they're called, says, okay. But George W. Bush, people forget this, he was a moderate. And the religious right was saying, we don't really have a candidate. That was the problem. They never really had a candidate. They had Pat Buchanan and various losers, but they had nobody who could challenge the established Republican Party. They said, so the moral majority, the religious right says, okay, we'll support George W. Bush. Even though he's a moderate, which means communist, but we want him to deliver. And George W. says, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And that's sort of 9/11 got him out of that. And they were very upset about that. And then you have Obama, and then Clinton before that, and then Obama. And then, surprisingly, this guy comes from reality TV, The Apprentice. And now, think about it, for the first time, they have a candidate, they have somebody, even though he didn't have any policy positions before the primaries, he was somebody who spoke to them. And you could see that in the first debate where he totally destroyed the conventional Republican nominees, politicians. Jeb Bush was going to be the nominee. Everybody knew that. Totally destroyed in the first debate, not because of conventional debating tactics, but saying nasty things about his opponents. And so there you have it, totally unexpected, unplanned for. But now this violently inclined base has their spokesman. And then we've seen, I don't know if it's the culmination, but a very visual expression of this in the attack on the Capitol. But again, sort of unplanned and unbeknownst to anybody, Donald Trump comes, and he must have been as surprised as everybody else in a way. I don't know. And not only does he get the nomination, but he gets elected, even though he lost the election. Point out. But yeah, that was a rather long, but it's very interesting how these 2 strains end up coalescing. And again, nobody really planned it, but this is a situation we have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you bring up the Christianity angle. Mm-hmm. That also plays into this, and it's related. Oh, yeah. And it's like completely analog to to the development in general. You have TV preachers and right. Megachurch pastors riling up a base using social issues in order to paint certain sections of sectors of society as just evil and in
Oh,
league with the devil, basically.
right.
And the hidden purpose of this is to get them to donate money, tax-free money for the church, so the pastor can buy like a private jet and stuff.
Mm. Yeah.
It's it works the same way all over the right wing of the political spectrum. Today you have like crazy conspiracy theory, QAnon people selling all kinds of weird stuff online.
Mm.
It's fairly obvious once you like scratch the surface that most of these people are just in it to make money. Just like Donald Trump only ran for president in order to boost one, his ego, two, his bank account.
Oh.
That's the only reason. And like the only real thread running through his presidency was self-promotion, both like stroking his own ego and just trying to like market himself and
Mm.
his properties. I should probably like bring up credit where credit's due. There's this fantastic article by
Yeah.
the historian Rick Perlstein. We'll post a link to it
Definitely.
in the comments.
Right.
That's highly recommended.
Mm.
It's written in sometime in 2012, I think,
Mm.
around the time of the Romney
Mm.
Obama election,
Mm.
and it basically tracks going back to 1964.
Mm.
It ties together these two strands of republicanism or
Mm.
reactionary or conservative politics, whatever you want to
Right.
call it, and tracks it throughout history and shows the development of political grifting. Basically, it's the only fair way to characterize it.
Mm.
And what's amazing about this article is looking back 8 years later with the,
Yeah. I mean,
uh,
2012, nobody was talking about these things.
no,
So yeah, no, we'll definitely provide a link. And I was unfamiliar with it, so thanks for pointing that out. But it's very interesting.
yeah, it's amazing. Just like 4 years after the article was written, you have Trump as a president,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Mm.
4 years after that, you have one half of American politics basically devolving into conspiracy theories
Mm.
and mail order schemes. It's uh, incredibly well written and well argued and highly recommended.
Yeah.
Like Rick Perlstein he's a great historian just generally.
Mm. Yeah. Definitely. We'll link that. And again, I mean, another thing that I hadn't thought of. I mean, I was very much aware of it at the time. All these TV ministries, and I mean, they were ridiculed by late night comedians and everything else. Again, there's just, it was grifting. It didn't use that word at that time, I don't think. But these TV ministers, they could have their own private jets and this, that, and the other thing. And of course, there are a number of sexual scandals, and that was a bit embarrassing for them. You don't hear so much about them now, but but nobody talked about them at that time in conjunction with what was going on in the Republican Party. As you say, I mean, this is really independent, but especially considering the religious right, or however you want to describe it, the Pence section of the party is very important within the Republican Party. Then it's interesting you have the same sort of practices going on. I mean, on a massive scale in these churches. And another thing to emphasize that you said that is very important is that this is really where, in a way, you get the demonization of Democrats or people or liberals in general, or people who can be vaguely linked to by the Democratic Party and liberal thinking in general. That if you're for gay marriage or if you're for abortion, then not only do you disagree on issues, but you're an evil person. And this is such an important uh, part of, I hesitate to say, Republican ideology, or the sort of rhetoric of the Republican Party, especially the extreme base. That it's really scary. And it's, I would say, very, very anti-democratic, because you're denying various people their democratic rights. And again, it starts with the African American population, but now it's been expanded to include women and gender fluid people and anybody else you can put in there. But again, this thing is not only that they're wrong, but these are bad people and they're evil. And then the next thing is, what happens to the body politic, to our society, if we let these people survive? And it's very, very scary, because I mean, you have the same thing as demonization of the Jewish population in Germany.
Yeah.
And it's not a danger to be taken lightly.
No, it's
Um,
super dangerous.
yeah,
Like it's quite literally demonization.
yeah,
It's and the problem is, if you if your political project includes painting people as actual demons, and like almost like in a supernatural way,
yeah,
sometimes like literally
yeah,
in a supernatural way, like with Alex Jones,
mhm,
people like that. Uh, how are you supposed to compromise?
yeah,
Uh, how are
yeah,
you supposed to like share a country with the people who are
exactly,
literal like demons? It's
exactly.
it's impossible. And the base, the Republican base, the radicalized Republican base, uh, they don't want to like share a
No,
country with these people. They
no,
don't. They have no interest in any sort of like polite political discussions and stuff like that.
no,
They basically want to purge the country at
exactly.
this point, as seen like in the assault on the capital. They want to
Oh,
purge government
yeah,
violently, basically.
exactly. No,
Uh,
that's a very important point. Yeah, no, they don't want to have other people in the country
yeah,
that disagree with them. And yeah,
it's the
I was
same
going to
sort
say
of
something
mechanic,
else, but mhm,
same sort of mechanic as you see with the Nazis. Once you start
yeah,
painting certain groups as subhuman,
yeah,
not even like real human beings, you can do
yeah,
whatever you want to them. And it's the
right,
same thing with these conspiracies, these crackpot ideas.
right,
You paint people as something other than human, and then
yeah,
at some point you can like basically do whatever you want to them.
right.
Uh,
Exactly, it lays the foundation for that.
yeah,
And you could say, some people would say, well, we're not there yet. No, I mean, where we are is bad enough. And
yeah,
the way one has become gradually, gotten used to this, again, go back to the Ronald Reagan years. It's a very different Republican country, even though he was very conservative. But I think another point just relevant to what you were saying, I know on the during the primaries, well, during last year and even before, people were saying, well, America's very much divided down the middle, and each party, Republicans demonize Democrats, and Democrats, demonize Republicans, but they don't.
yeah,
And this is something in the media we haven't gotten into. I mean, the so-called mainstream media, CNN and MSNBC and others say, well, both sides are doing something wrong. And I mean, it's nice to be objective. Well, it goes beyond being objective, but sometimes there aren't two different sides. And no, people like, if you take Pelosi on the one hand or AOC, they don't demonize. They think Trump is a lousy president and they're doing very bad things, but they're not saying they have pedophile rings running out of a pizza shop and things like that, and they don't tell their supporters to go to the Capitol and attack it. So it's a very different. I mean, we're in a situation today where you have one party that basically stands for democracy, which is the Democrats, and you can agree or disagree with their policies or which part of the party you want to identify with. And you have another party which is not only sort of de facto anti-democratic, but it is in fact very aggressively anti-democratic,
yeah,
because they know that's the only way they can well, that's another step, how they can win elections. But no, they don't believe in democracy. And this is painfully evident in just the last few months of American politics. So it's dangerous.
Yeah, and like they don't even subscribe to the idea that like all people are of equal worth, and that's
Mm.
supposed to be like some sort of fundamental thing, even for
Mm.
democracy. Like you have to believe that, otherwise why respect other people?
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you about this ridiculous both side system.
Mm.
Um, it's uh, it's completely ridiculous to claim that Democrats demonize their opponents in anything like the same way that
It's
Republicans do.
no,
Like I've never heard anyone claim
no.
that. Oh, I've heard people claim that Mitch McConnell should be hanged, but only Republicans. I've never heard a
Uh-huh.
Democrat say that.
Okay. I was going to say, I
Uh,
haven't heard Democrats say, oh, yeah, yeah, exactly.
no,
And then Pence, they went to the Capitol
yeah,
building with
exactly.
the noose,
The people who
symbolic
tried
maybe,
Yeah, the people who tried to find Pence and probably hang
or
him,
not.
those weren't Democrats, those were Republicans. So it's one side is completely out of hand,
Yeah.
and trying to make some sort of equivalency between the two is it's kind of
Yeah.
tasteless, if you ask
Yeah.
me.
Maybe a
Um,
year ago, people could do that, and see NBC and MSNBC. But I think I don't really follow them all that much in terms of political. Well, I do CNN sometimes political analysis, but I think a lot of things changed with the attack on the Capitol building, because even then one can notice a shift, the way people commentators on, well, I was listening mainly to CNN, not MSNBC. Get a bit tired of, but they were talking about it in more realistic terms and the danger of fascism. I remember when Donald when Trump was elected, I said something here in Sweden about him being a crypto fascist or something. He had fascist tendencies. Because, oh, you can't say that, because I said, but he has those tendencies. He's a sort of, and now and then at the end of the election. People were talking about him on mainstream media as having or even being a fascist. This is a term which can be difficult to use, but anyway, I think the political discussion has changed. But unfortunately, the Republican Party has become so extreme that now we're talking about them in different and maybe more realistic terms. But then whether that's enough, I mean, it's a start, but. Um, so it's ironic now that you have not only one party that is for democracy, the other is against it, but then the party that's against it is running in democratic elections, sort of like in Germany before the Nazis took over. But it's interesting. One commentator, I hadn't thought of it. This is a few weeks ago. I forget her name, but she was so the Republican Party now is they have no policies. They have no economic or social, no economic policies. And I thought, wait, well, that's right, right. So she was talking about the situation in Congress. So they have no policies whatsoever, and they're they're going to election, and they can actually win elections. It has to do with the voting suppression, the way boundaries are drawn, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, it struck me for the first 5 years. Two major parties. One of them, no, we don't have any economic. We don't care about these things, but they have these. And I'm glad you say social instead of cultural. I have a problem with people talking about gay rights or abortion or gun ownership as being cultural issues. Um, but this is what they've really, hunkered down on. And again, it goes back to the 60s and the Southern strategy. This is what we can win on. And what is especially dangerous to me is that they do, and they will win on these issues. So they can go back to their local constituencies, these people in the House especially, and we're not going to talk about $15 an hour or anything like that, but we're going to talk about gay marriage or whatever, or gun rights especially, and they'll win. And that is especially problematic for me. So it's bad enough that one party doesn't even engage in the economic debate. And what's all now, and again, is something that's just struck me um, in the House and in the Senate, not one single Republican, I think I'm getting that right, not one single Republican voted for the COVID relief package. Not even in the House. And you would assume that in the House, which has a much broader representation, that there'd be some Republicans that would think, this is probably a pretty good idea, but not one.
I think they've learned their lesson from Mitch McConnell. Their role as the opposition party is like McConnell's stated goal during
Right,
Obama's presidency was block everything.
right, right.
Doesn't matter if it's something we actually want. If it's a policy that we would actually suggest and try to implement if we were in power.
Ah,
That
oh,
doesn't
okay.
matter. All that matters is just block everything.
No, you're right.
And I think that's the reason why you have like we spoke last week about like states with quite serious economic problems, like West Virginia and like Kentucky and places like that.
Mm,
Their representatives were elected to help their constituents, and that includes making sure people actually get have like a fairly decent standard of living, and just purely economic issues,
right.
like the stimulus bill, for example. That's hugely important in people's lives, but
Mm,
they've grifted people into voting for them,
mm,
and once they're in office, they just drop all policy questions. They
yeah.
don't actually have a program
No,
aside
no.
from just blocking
Yeah, and
blocking whatever the Democrats
sorry to interrupt
propose.
you. But, no, we'll continue with that. But in fact, it went to the extreme, which one didn't realize the significance of when it happened, that in the 2020 election, the Republican Party, in fact, had no party platform. I mean, literally.
No,
I mean, before
yeah,
one talked about, oh, these parties, they don't have any platform. Well, they actually do. It's on paper, but then it doesn't really mean anything. And then for the first time, no, we don't, and one should have seen, I mean, the red light's really flashing there that, no, we don't need a party platform. It's just we believe whatever the great leader Donald Trump tells us.
yeah. Well, and it makes complete sense. Like this is the
It
thing about
does, unfortunately.
the Pearlstein article.
Mm,
This is the reason it makes complete sense, because it's completely empty. It's nothing but marketing.
yeah,
It's marketing based on grief and hatred and
yeah,
that sort of emotion, and there's no actual like political content. Uh,
yeah,
so it's like, of course they don't need like a platform. Why would they? It's all image. It's like it tracks one for one with like Donald Trump and his person. It's all image. It's
yeah.
all a giant fraud, a giant grift.
Oh,
And once in power, they're just gonna like act for their own benefit,
yeah,
not anyone else's, not even their voters and constituents.
yeah.
It's I don't know. It's hard to even, for me at least, to even call it a democracy anymore. Like
No,
if
no,
that's
it's a
half,
great danger for democracy. I mean, that's why
yeah.
we take it up. So, so what do you think's number of questions? But even though you didn't answer this before, or didn't talk about it before, but what do you think is going to happen
Well, that's
now
the
that we've been
question.
talking about this? So maybe we have a better idea now now that we've talked about this. So what's going to happen if this is the present day situation, which I think it is? And first of all, I must say, if people think we're being anti-Republican, I mean, I was a supporter. I almost joined the Young Republican Club in college because there was no Young Democrat Club, which sort of said something about the college I went to. But they were actually liberal Republicans, and I did support Nelson Rockefeller. And one of the high points of my undergraduate career was when he came to speak at this rather, I wouldn't say obscure, it was a very high quality small college in West Virginia. And he was there, and I got to hear Nelson Rockefeller, and the fact that he was a millionaire family or billionaire, whatever, it didn't really make a difference. And I mean, I can look back to the 50s, a certain amount of nostalgia, um, because you had a situation where you had two parties, a functioning system where they appealed to voters in general. You had liberals and conservatives in each party. Nelson Rockefeller is very liberal. And then there was a mayor of New York at the same time, John Lindsay. Probably nobody knows or recognizes. He was sort of the Kennedy of the Republic. He was very good looking. He was very dynamic, and he was very liberal. And I think he was elected mayor of New York. But there were options. There were options out there. And just to draw attention to that, to show how far we've come now. So it's not like, Republican bashing, but I mean, it's really, it'd be nice. And people even up to maybe 2 years ago were saying, what we need is, to rebuild the two-party functioning system. But I mean, I don't, I mean, we've moved long far beyond that. So again, what do you think is going to happen, or what are your comments?
Well, this is the thing, like, because of how the system is set up, you have to have two parties.
Oh,
And one party at the moment is basically like a smoldering ruin. I don't see. I mean, I should probably be careful because, like, speculating about this stuff, who knows?
yeah, exactly.
Anything can
No,
happen, basically. But I mean, it's hard to see in a situation where major donors start abandoning the party.
right.
Uh, and at the same time the base is heading off in a completely different direction, the
No,
voter base. Like, what do you do?
mm,
I The only thing I can see like saving the Republican Party is if they somehow manage to get rid of Trump and just like purge that part of the party and start appealing to like a saner electorate.
good luck with that.
But
No, I'm sorry.
like,
Uh,
who's gonna listen to them anymore after like the past 10 years?
mhm.
It's I don't know. I don't really see a future for the Republican Party, but at the same time, it's impossible to imagine any alternative
Yeah.
either. Something has to happen. So
Yeah, no, I think it's, yeah, obviously it's very difficult and very, in fact, dangerous to speculate in the situation we are now. But I think it's going to be very, very difficult to, yeah, to get the base under control again now that they've, that's why the attack on the Capitol and everything else. Now they've tasted power, and
yeah,
Trump is not going to go away. I don't think he's serious about, becoming president again. Maybe Ivanka. Because at the same time, again, this ties in with the grifting. He's built his own family and empire too. So you have those, and then you have the people who are not in the immediate family who are grifting and very extreme and so forth. And they're the ones getting attention. So if you're, say you're a Republican donor and you're very unhappy about this, how do you try to, because you have to, um, how do you control these people? And maybe there's a path back to the Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, where you have, an upset base, but not one that. But I mean, we've moved so far beyond that. But it's interesting. What I mean, what we can say, I think, is that there's a very intense battle going on within the Republican Party,
yeah.
and we tend to see it in terms of Trump and McConnell. But I mean, behind the scenes and the donors, because they don't want to lose out on this. They don't want to lose out on the big tax cuts. And it's not enough to think, well, there's enough Democrats that'll, no, they're, even if they're sort of conservative economically Democrats, they're not going to, give you these enormous. So how do we have influence in this party? So I think that's probably maybe where the answer lies. And right now there's a battle going on to control the finances of the Republican Party, because Donald Trump, in true Trumpian style, is I think he's suing or he's criticizing the Republican Party. Says you can't use my image anymore. And that's it. His knee-jerk response is to sue. But behind that is a more serious thing. And that is to create says, hey, I'm the former president. Well, actually, I'm not the former president. I'm still been elected, but anyway. But I'm your leader. So I should have full access to the finances of the National Republican Party. And now for the first time, there's a pushback in the National Republican Party organization. Wait a second, because he already has access to the database, has an enormous amount of information, not just his own that he collected on these rallies and stuff, but the Republican Party. Because the idea was that even if you're an ex-president, you're not going to harm the party, but that's gone out the window. So there's a battle going on for the finances of the Republican Party. And he's very serious about this. But the donors, again, the people operating behind the scenes and so forth, and McConnell is basically, as you probably know, is on his way out. He's planning his retirement, and nobody can really replace him. That sort of pondus that he has.
Yeah, there's nobody as
No,
skilled and savvy as McConnell
no,
waiting in the wings. So, but it's no, it's amazing. It's like a complete civil war within the party. I don't know. Did you watch CPAC? Did you see Donald Trump's speech?
I was going to. I only saw parts of it. So, yeah.
Everybody afterwards focused on him hinting at possibly running again, and like, sure, that's interesting information, but at the same time, he changes his mind like from minute to minute. So whatever he says now about running doesn't have any like bearing on what's going to happen a couple of years from now. What's more interesting is he spent a couple of minutes reading out an enemy list.
That's right. Yeah.
Nobody really mentioned this afterwards, but this is kind of a scary thing. He read out this enemies list of a dozen names, roughly, all Republicans.
Yeah, Republicans again. Yeah,
and telling like the CPAC audience basically to go after them.
Yeah.
So he's actively like stoking this internal conflict. And the other day he went public declaring that in a year's time he's gonna travel to Alaska to campaign against Murkowski in her
the Republican senator
re-elected to the Senate. And it's like literally civil war within the Republican Party, and I like, you see me laughing, and I can't like lie to you. I find this like really funny. It's a great like comeuppance for the Republican Party, because for, like I said, for decades they've been like stoking hatred towards black people, brown people, gay people, lesbians, transsexuals, women, like basically any group you can name. And it's finally coming home to roost, and it's finally exploding in their faces. And that's entertaining, but at the same time, I don't know, it feels nobody's in control of this.
It's very dangerous.
Yeah.
No, the thing is also about the the craziness and the humor. I mean, people, and of course this is the way it was reported on the media, and the coverage was, oh, these are all crazy people and so forth. And I mean, I fall into that as well, but that detracts from the seriousness of the situation, which I hope we've managed to convey. anyway. But I mean, it's difficult because at the same time, you know, the absurdity of a former Republican president going to Alaska to campaign against a popular Republican senator because she voted against him. I mean, you know, you can't make this stuff up. I mean,
It is funny.
it is funny one way, and it's a way it's come up in, but it's a very dangerous situation. No, I've forgotten about the hit list, and of course, what it reminds me of now when you mention it, it's of course the attack on the on Congress. It's the
Yeah.
same thing. These people, who reads a list of names, these people are your enemies.
Go get them.
Exactly. I mean, it's not exactly subtle, you know. Oh, I didn't mean for them to be violent. I mean, but
That's
so,
the
but
thing.
on the other hand, what was it that only 55% wanted him to be president again or something? There was various opinion polls.
I saw this political poll that said 59% of all Republicans want Donald Trump to play a prominent role in the party,
Right.
whatever that means. Probably basically what he's doing now. And 52 or 53% want him to be the nominee in the next election. And the second most popular candidate is Mike Pence at like 12% or something.
Yeah, which is really down there.
No, yeah, he completely dominates the party at this point.
I think we should try to end on a rather positive note, which I'll try to do now. No, but I mean, it's just something that one can talk about or take into consideration. Another something that might happen within the Republican Party, just because things have become so extreme and one part of the party has really taken over the rest, is that maybe there's a lot of people out in the country, and again, America doesn't have a really highly, you know, strictly disciplined or organized two-party system. But there might be a lot of people out in the country who don't identify with being Democrat and don't identify with being these crazy people, and think, you know, maybe, and especially on the local level, think let's try to get some other people in local and state, and especially in the House of Representatives. And, you know, maybe so-and-so's local shop owner maybe has some ideas how to, you know, revitalize the downtown area or something like that, that there might be people who don't immediately identify with being Republican now, but have some sort of, if you like, Republican psychology. I was looking at it a bit more conservatively than, say, the Democratic Party, but that there might be, maybe a vacuum is too strong, but a vacuum for more sensible, you know, conservative ideas. And then maybe they'll take up the challenge and say, we're not going to, just because these crazies dominate the primary system, which we talk about later, that we challenge them. And all it takes is really, just like with the Tea Party, you start winning some of these primary elections, and you have a very different situation. So maybe, I don't see it happening tomorrow, but maybe that's something which might, maybe the whole democratic thing will start to adjust itself. There might be other voices, new voices, that come into the political discussion, which would be more than welcome. I mean, it wouldn't be good with just having a sort of monolithic Democratic Party. But you have different ways of solving the enormous problems that America has. And maybe the post-COVID thing, or whatever it's going to be, all the problems that are faced, that you'll have a different political discussion, and then people will say, we have to leave behind the craziness which does not address real economic issues, but just goes off on the, you know, so-called cultural things. I don't know, but is that a possibility?
Sure.
Sure, whatever.
Anything can happen. No, but I think that you're completely right. If the Republican Party is ever going to like recover from this, it has to be ordinary people like getting engaged and taking back control of the party. That's the only solution.
Right.
The central party leadership isn't going to solve this problem.
No.
It has to come from the bottom up, just like Trump did. Like
Oh.
That's the key, I think, and like something is going to happen. This current movement is going to burn out in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Something like this can't last. It's going to end one way or another.
Right.
Something is going to replace it, and I think your idea is one of the better I've heard. Just like regular old Republicans taking back control of the
Yeah, could
party.
be. Yeah, Republicans in a new context. You also have a younger generation. I mean, several generations now, but I mean, people who have grown up with the 2008 economic crisis, this and so forth. And I mean, also people who might lean Republican who couldn't, don't demonize gay people and don't care about these things because they're living, because American society for people under 30 or 35 is a very different country than, say, people who are over 65, and we just don't care about these divisive social, religious issues, but want to focus on how do I get out of student debt? What's going to happen to the environment and things like that. So, it's a possibility.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. I think this would be a good good time to end before we start throwing up our hands in despair again.
Yeah.
Can do that afterwards. Well, I'm very happy with that. People will watch to the very end because you get something more positive. But it's it's American politics is always in flux. It's always changing. So
Yeah. And click the link in the description for the excellent article by Rick Perlstein.
Right. I'll be posting this later. You'll send me the link and I'll put it up there. Yeah, definitely. And I'll remind people about that. Definitely. So not quite sure what we're going to talk about next time. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
The things are going on. But we'll come up with something interesting and insightful, I'm sure.
Okay. Sure, we'll find something to talk about.
It's something we enjoy talking about anyway. Okay, I'm going to stop recording. I'm really great at this technical stuff. So see you everybody next week. Thanks very much.
Bye.